name is Cheryl Ogden, and I am the director here of the Champaign County Historical Society. It is awesome to see everybody here today. I would like to thank you all for joining us. And while you are here, I would encourage all of you to walk around and see what's happening. We are in the process of renovations, and these renovations are far from complete, but I would love for you to stop and visit and see what's going on, and then come back again in a couple of months and see the progress we've made. Okay? So anybody, when you have questions, try to hold them for the end so that she doesn't lose her flow. And then we will gladly answer whatever questions you have at the end of the program. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Kim Snyder. She is not only a member of our Board of Trustees, she is our treasurer, and she is a member of the DAR, which, if you don't know, shame on you, but they are very passionate right now, especially about bringing to light the lost patriots. We believe Richard Stanhope, one of those lost patriots, and we would very much like to get a complete story for the gentleman and make sure it's an accurate story. So Kim is here to tell you where we started this journey and where it is going. And if you have any questions for her, please don't hesitate to ask at the end. Without further ado, Ms. Kim Snyder.
Thank you, Cheryl. I am a member of the DAR. I'm currently serving as registrar for the Urbana Chapter DAR, which means if you want to be a member of the DAR, I'm the one you talk to. I help you with the paperwork. Before we get started too deep into this presentation, I want to give you a little preface to who I am and why I'm doing this. So first off, I want you to understand that, did everybody know Janet Ebert? Yeah? Okay. We lost Janet, what has it only been 2 or 3 years ago? Far too soon. When we lost Janet, I became the custodian of her research. Now, that's good and bad, because if you knew Janet, you knew that she hoarded research. I will confess.
Move your mic out a little bit.
Here?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that better? Okay. This is the first time we've used the wireless mic like this, so we're not sure what to do with it. Anyway, so Janet died, and I took over her research. Gathering the research out of her house was a challenge and a half. I had multiple copies of a lot of things, and I will confess, I cried the day I had to do it. 30 copies of one newspaper for a 1-by-4-inch article. I know. There's a lot of stuff that has had to go into the trash, and so it's taking me a lot of time to sort through this information. But Richard has been in my home since then, and I've become fairly familiar with him. I believe he's a friend, and I'm going to call him Richard because I feel that close to him. And I know you'll understand that. One of Janet's dying wishes was for his story to be found out and told correctly, and for him to finally be recognized as an official patriot for the American Revolution. I believe he is a genuine patriot, but we're going to talk about some questions and some issues that we have with that proving. Secondly, and this is a bit of a confession, what the ever-loving is a white woman doing up here talking about a black man? You understand the question. It feels a little funky, and I want you to understand that I do feel a little funky about doing that. But underrepresented patriots are a huge issue right now, particularly with the 250. The DAR wants to tell the whole story. For example, did you know that the American Revolution, the soldiers that fought in the American Revolution, 25% of them were black? Did you know that? That's a significant number. I would like to tell you how that relates to today, but they took that information off the Army website. So, but 25%. Now let's think about that a little bit more. There were also Spaniards, Italians, we know about the French, Native tribesmen, the American Indians. So I'm quarter Cherokee, I try to say tribesmen. There were a lot of people of different colors, different ethnicities, different backgrounds that came and fought in the American Revolution. Oh, come on in. Are you one of the cousins?
Yes.
Come on up here to the front. You got the rest of your family's up here. So I took it very. So having this charge to find the truth about the rest of the unrecognized persons in the American Revolution, I take that charge very seriously. I'm going to present to you what I know, what I'd like to know, where I think we need to go from here. This is going to be the good, the bad, the uncomfortable. I may use some phrasing that is not correct. If I do, don't hesitate to correct me. I'm good with that. I ask a lot of questions. I don't take anyone else's answers as gospel. And I have looked at a lot of information, and I continue to look at a lot of information. And like I said, there was a lot of paperwork that came to my house. Okay. I think this is going to be a good stepping point. So, what do we know? We know that Richard was born in 1748. March 1st is the date that we have. Now, dates at this time period get a little funky because when the calendar was standardized, you know, George Washington has 2 birth dates because it depends on what year you're looking at. So we believe that Richard was born in 1748, March 1st, at Wakefield Plantation. Now, Mary Ball Washington owned this plantation. Mary Ball. Augustine Washington was her second husband. She was his second wife. When he died about 1744 or so, Mary took over running at least 4 plantations. Now let's think about that for a minute. A single woman with children is running 4 plantations. This is like running 4 local Honeywell plants. There's people, there's land, there's crops, and she's in charge of all of it. So we need to stop and think. That woman had some cojones, okay? And let's appreciate that. We believe that Richard was the son of Jenny. Now here's what I found in a history of Mary Ball. Jenny came from Africa, and she was purchased and placed at the Wakefield Plantation. There is some possibility, it's an unconfirmed, that a man named Orinoco, did I say that correctly? Orinoco, can we agree on that? Was his father. We don't know that for a fact because at this time, what's happening is parentage for the slaves was a little bit funky. Your status as a child was determined by your mother, not necessarily your father. So if Jenny is a slave, then Richard is a slave. If Orinoco is free, that does not affect Richard. Follow me? Okay. Very strange in a man-ruled society, but this is how it was being done. Okay? We'll discuss more of his parentage a little bit later.
Was it,
Yeah.
was it done like that? Because if 9 times out of 10, the man was probably a slave master, and if he's free, that means they would be free? Is that why they can?
We are at a time where we are not. Slavery in America has a really weird history. At this point, we are starting to see some transition from you're a slave because I bought you, and you're a slave because I bred for you. Make sense?
Yes.
Some places are doing this, but what's happening is with the slave owners, the status of the child is changing from the status of both parents to the status of the mother, because they can prove the mother. I mean, you know who birthed a baby.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily know who fathered the baby. And it's a very strange time, and I'm still trying to get my hands across it. I'm sure there's somebody that knows a little bit more about that, but Virginia was a little bit weird about this time. So some people were into born slaves, always a slave, and some were not.
I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that a lot of them were forced to procreate so that they can repopulate too. So not necessarily were they having children
That's a good question.
within wedlock, they were forced to because they're slave masters.
It's a good question. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's evolving to that. Okay. At some point, Richard married Charity. Now, we don't know married. We don't know if this is jump the broom, which is, sort of being married, or if there was an actual marriage ceremony. We don't know if Charity is free or not. She could be free. But we know that he had 6 children with Charity. Now, we also know that Charity did not come to Ohio. So we don't know if Charity was still alive, if he just left the wife and children in Virginia. If she was free, then the children would be free. So we don't know exactly what the situation was on that. I would love to know that piece of the story. Okay. Richard was ordained as a Baptist minister. This is very interesting. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm a licensed preacher. It takes a lot of work to be recognized by a community as a preacher. This tells me that Richard was incredibly smart. And you can take a verse and turn it into a sermon, and both white people and black people stopped and listened to him. This is very, very interesting. This tells me that Richard is a very intelligent person. We believe, let's see, here's the other part. When Richard came here, there's a church in Concord near where he lived, and he went and presented himself to the church, and the church accepted him not only as a member, black man in a white church, okay? They accepted him as a full member and allowed him to preach. Yeah, so, this is pretty significant. We believe Richard was freed in 1799-ish after George Washington's death. Now I want to talk a little bit about George Washington here for just a minute. We know George Washington died, he caught, I think it was strep, something like strep, and he died from the strep. George had already been thinking about, what do I do with my property when I die? We do know that George had an escaped slave and he never quit looking for her. We've got that story documented. But George was at a point in his life where he didn't think that slavery was right. But, do I set everybody free? If I set everybody free, how am I going to pay them for the work? Do they have enough education so that they can live independently? Because he also had put out an order to his plantation. I want everybody to be able to read and write and have a skill. So, I'm not ever going to say that slavery was right, but I think he was processing his responsibility to the people on his plantation in an appropriate way. So Richard was freed, 1799. Now we do know for a fact that in 1807, Richard and Gracie, second wife, registered in the Court of Common Pleas right here in Urbana as free persons. And I have seen, I've got a picture of the page where that is noted. So we know that in 1807, he and Gracie were free. He settled in Champaign County with his wife Gracie as a farmer and a well digger. Now, I got to tell you a funny story about the well digging. He went into business with one of the white farmers, and Richard was his premier well digger. Richard is known to have dug every correct well in Concord Township. That's pretty impressive. It takes some intelligence and some guts to dig those wells. Well, one day he was digging a well, and there was a well collapse. So he's all the way down at the bottom, and the well starts collapsing, so he starts pulling on the rope, pulling himself up, going to get out of there. The well continued to collapse, and they thought they'd lost him, and so they got a piece of cotton, and they wrapped it under his arms, and they pulled him out, and couldn't see him breathing, thought he was dead. Oh my gosh, Richard is dead. And the first thing they heard was, I ain't dead. I'm worth 2 live niggers. I'm quoting Richard. That is not language that I like to use, but I'm quoting him. But it sounds hilarious to me because here he is doing his job, knowing that there's the possibility of a cave-in. He could have lost his life, and he comes out of this hole with a congenial attitude, making jokes about the fact that he just nearly buried himself to death. Very funny. So he must have been very good because he dug every correct well in the county. Takes some smarts. Let's see. Richard's name is listed in a variety of ways. I have found him listed as Stanhope with two N's, and Stanhope. So there is some transition about his name. So you guys know where he got the name Stanhope?
George Washington.
Well, sort of. So he was apparently, when he was little, he'd be in the house a lot, and they tell him, Richard, stand up. Every time the Washingtons would come in, Richard, stand up. He thought his name was Stanhope. I mean, it makes sense. So we thought his name was Stanhope. So every time he presents himself, at least early on, he's calling himself Richard Stanhope. And in fact, his will, I've got a copy of his will here, and he is referred to Richard Stanhope, and then there is a note, also known as Stanhope. So it's very, very interesting. So we have a little bit of a challenge when we're finding documents on Richard. We've got to be a little creative with our words. This is really cool, and this is one of the funniest stories I think I've found. Richard joined up with General William Hull for his march to Detroit, the War of 1812. Okay? This is hilarious because, and I think you're going to laugh with me. The story is that when they got to Detroit, William Hull was captured. His whole unit was captured. And some little British soldier says to Richard, pull your wagon over there, just, unhitch the horses. We're going to tell you what to do, how to handle the things. And I can just see Richard. And I can hear him thinking, maybe not said this, but thinking, oh, hell no. I've seen what you guys do to prisoners of war. Unhitched the first horse, climbed up on the back of that horse, and boat-tailed it back here. Overnight. No lights, no roads, just go south and let's get going. I can just see him saying that, and it just does, but I can understand that. If he'd been in the Revolution, he would have seen what the British do, and he would have said, not today. Yeah, that's right. So, Richard applied for his Revolutionary pension in 1859. Now, 31 pages on fold 3. His application, testimonies of local people. There's a response from the War Department, and there are contesting documents in here as well saying, he really was there. What's the problem? How can we get this fixed? He was denied because he didn't have all the information that they needed. Well, the man was over 100 years old. So we'll look at that a little bit more in a moment. We know he was married 3 times, and the records vary, but it's either 27 or 28 children. Girlfriends, that's a tribe and a half. 28 children. It would have taken 3 women to have that many children. And you all understand what I'm saying, right? So, he died in 1862 at the age of 114 years old. 114. Now, there's a white man that is listed as the oldest known Revolutionary War veteran in Ohio, and I believe he was 108. I think Richard has him beat. Oh, yeah. So, Richard is buried in Concord Township. This is a picture of his tombstone. I'm going to tell you, Richard has been considered a VIP for the Urbana DAR chapter for a very long time. Now, we were founded in 1890, so we were not there when he died. So if you've heard that story, that's not quite right. We picked up the story much later. But we've been working on proving his service for approximately 100 years. The work on his acceptance as a Revolutionary War Patriot has been happening since 1859. The initial headstone was placed in 1958 by the Urbana chapter. There had previously been 2 trees marking that grave. Well, the trees fell down, and the women of the DAR said, we have to mark this person, we don't want him lost. So that's when the gravestone, this initial gravestone was laid. And if you can't read it, it says, valet during the American Revolution and faithful chief of servants for George Washington at Mount Vernon. Born Fredericksburg, Virginia, March 1, 1748. Died near Urbana, Ohio, September 20, 1862. We're going to talk about some of the language on that here in a bit. In 2008, the NSDAR, that's the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, authorized this marker that's at his feet to be placed alongside the permanent marker. And this, 2 other chapters helped us with this, the Laganda chapter, and I was supposed to look that up last night and I forgot to do it. I think it was Marymount chapter also helped us with that laying. And we are, let's see, I got, my slides are not going like they're supposed to. Okay, the other thing that we're working on is there is an America 250 marker, and there's a committee for the state of Ohio. And we have a woman that's working with the Ohio 250 program to see if we can get a 250 marker placed on that. If that happens, that will be this fall. So we're working on that now. Okay, Richard Stanhope's pension was denied. Well, I gotta tell you, I'm gonna have to temper my language here because I'm angry at this slide. I'm pretty angry, and so I'm going to try to temper what I have to say. The application was made in 1859. Okay, and I got all 31 pages here, right? Okay. Why was it denied? The additional documents speak of his reliability, and some of the men that wrote documents also had seen his ammo box and the document with Washington's name on it. Okay. But he could not provide his birth date, which we now know and have verified that it's March 1st, 1748. His parents' name, or at least his mother's name. Jenny probably would have been enough, but he couldn't remember Jenny's name. It was Mom, I mean. And he couldn't remember the plantation that he was born on. He's over 100 years old. So, here's my problem with this. When it was rejected, it was sent to Virginia to be assessed. I see some people nodding. You know what happened. There were some feelings at that time that black men didn't serve. I've also seen applications that have no more information than this on it from white men that were approved. It makes me angry. It makes me angry. But we're working on it, and I'm going to tell you where we are. We have some evidence of his service. We know that he had a cartridge box. We have testimony about the cartridge box seen by several notable contemporaries. There's contemporary testimony of a certificate signed by George Washington. Now, I don't know what the certificate is. Could it be the manumission paper, did I say that right? The Freedom Papers, that now reside with a cousin in Florida. And I don't know who the cousin is, but I'd really like to see a copy of a photograph, a high-quality photograph of that. If I have to, I'll go to Florida.
Do you have the cousin's name? No?
I've got it written down someplace. I'm sorry, my brain sometimes doesn't keep all of that information. I've got it written down. We'll find it. The other possibility is it could be a warrant. Yes, he had a warrant, so. Possible media exposure. So we've got a number of possible metal. There's a metal mentioned by one of his contemporaries. I don't know what this metal is. There's no description of the metal. I have no idea what this means. We've got this story that the relics were burned in a house fire. Now, one of the documents is supposedly was entrusted to someone, a relative in Cincinnati, and survived. Was that the freedom paper? I don't know. I don't know what that was. Here's our proof. And here's where I'm going to ask you to help me out. There is a book. It is an oversized book. It's about so thick. In this book is a list of men that were treated at a medical camp in Pennsylvania. Richard tells the story of a bullet passing through one of his legs above the knee, and he required medical treatment. From Brandywine to just south of Philadelphia is a pretty long haul. Here's what happened, and I think this was brilliant of George Washington's planning. So when they would have a battle, and there's men injured, and they're all over the field, so Washington would have all of the men picked up, put on carts, sleds, horses, however it is they needed to get them moving, and they would move those injured as fast as possible to the medical camp. Okay? Between the injured people and the opposing army, the rest of the men would form a blockade, and they would hold off the opposing army forces. This is brilliant strategy because that means you didn't lose as many men on the field. Richard was one of those men that was picked up and taken to Pennsylvania to this medical camp. His name is on a list. It says they came from Brandywine. It describes the injury, and it tells in that list that he's a black man. Boom, there we go. There's our evidence. I had it in my hand and I lost it. And in Janet's stuff in her house, it didn't come home with me, and I just killed myself. Other people have this book. So if you've heard of this list, if anybody knows about this book, we're looking for this listing. And I'm killing for this. I'm dying to have this document, but we're gonna find it. We're gonna find it because it exists. Richard obtained land with a warrant. We have a map over here on the wall that you can't see. This square is from that map. If you look on this map, right here, it says Richard Stanhope, Washington's servant. I've looked at a lot of old maps. I have never seen that indication on any other old plat map anywhere. Somebody contemporary believed these stories. That's really good evidence. This map was approved by Congress. So the story has been in Congress for some time. Okay? We do also have a first-person story published. This one, I'm going to pull it out of the holder. This story, which is in the Community News, May of 2008, is a reprint from an earlier version. I'm looking for the earlier news story. But it composes first-person accounts of some part of the story. And so I'm looking for it may be in a Cincinnati paper. I think I may be close to finding it. It was also in September of '87 in the Springfield paper. So we have this story has been published repeatedly in the years. So these three documents are three of his obituaries. Every one of these stories says the same thing. He was a noble and honorable man. Now these are all can be found on newspapers.com. So one of the questions that I've been addressing is, was Richard Stanhope actually a Washington? Some of you may have heard this story, some of you may not. There was a story that I picked up as I was talking with people and going through things that that Richard Stanhope was actually a son of George's father, Augustine Washington. You've heard it? Yeah. Well, it's not Augustine Sr. This is an old story. What we do know is that George was about 16 when Richard was born. So that's an interesting part of it. Augustine Sr., George's father, okay, died when George was about 10 or 11. Okay, that's 4 to 5 years before Richard was born. Now, I can do a lot of funky math things, but that one ain't gonna work. However, his older half-brothers, Lawrence was about 30 when Richard was born, and then the other half-brother, Augustine Jr., was about 28. Could it be that he is Augustine Jr.'s son, or Richard's son? I'm sorry, Lawrence's son. One of the, okay, so, hold on, I wasn't quite through with that one. Go back. So remember that when Augustine Sr. died, Mary Ball took over the 4 plantations. So she sent word over to Europe because Lawrence and Augustine Jr. were in Europe getting their education. So they stopped their education and came back to Virginia. But we don't know how long that took. So that's a story that needs to be fleshed out a little bit farther. Is he a half-brother's son? Possibly. We know for a fact that he is not George's half-brother because Augustine Sr. was already dead. So we still have this question about parentage. But the other question that we have when it all shakes out is, does it really make a difference for his status as a Revolutionary War Patriot? No, it doesn't. But it may make a difference in the overall story. Right. Oh, we're still going backwards. Sorry. Technology. I love it. Hate it. Here's another sticky question. Was Richard Stanhope's story confused with Billy Lee's? So we have a lot of information about Billy Lee. Washington actually talks about Billy Lee in a number of his letters. Now, we know that Billy Lee was at not Mount Vernon, the fort. Sorry, excuse me. I really need to watch what I'm saying when I've got a mic. We know that Billy Lee followed him to all of the camps. However, I don't think Billy Lee was the only person going with him to the camps. A person of George's stature, an overall general, he would have had 5 or 6 or 10 people. There would have been a whole crew of people working with him. Billy Lee is a slave that was acquired from the Lee family. He had a phenomenal education, wrote some of George's documents, organized some of George's documents, actually worked with Hamilton on organizing some of George's things, would often be entrusted to run an errand into town. We know that Billy Lee's allowance is talked about, so we know that George gave his slaves allowances, and Billy was actually dressed as nicely as the general on occasion. So we know that Billy Lee had a very high prestige in George's life and was well regarded, and the reason he has the name Lee is because he came from the Lee family. Yes?
I don't mean to interrupt, this is not a question, I hope this dovetails into your story. When I was a kid, which was many moons ago obviously, in Champaign County, Ohio, there's a graveyard. It's in Orange Township. Okay. It was always rumored that, quote unquote, Washington's bodyguard was there and buried. I have also heard rumors, I was just telling Mr. Smith, I also heard rumors that Mr. Stanhope's remains were exhumed and taken to Champaign County. Now, this is all speculation from a 73-year-old man trying to reflect on what he was told at 7 or 8 years old, right?
Yeah,
but anyway, there is an honorable-looking grave in Orange Township, and I know right where it is, and I'll go back there with some sort of military honors, and it says something about something, and I don't remember the name on it. It's Washington's quote-unquote bodyguard, whoever in the world that would be.
Yeah, I don't have any information on that would cross into Richard Stanhope's story. Richard is buried in Concord Township.
I got you, but
his body was never moved.
Well,
yeah,
I'm telling you what I was told as a kid. anybody in this room knows me knows I'm crazy, but I also know I have a vivid memory about things from my childhood. Thank you.
So the stories about Billy Lee and Richard seem to run parallel. So the question is, have we mistaken some of Billy Lee's story for Richard Stanhope's? The other thing is, have we misinterpreted some of Richard's story as Billy Lee's? There are a number of stories that could be parallel. There are some key differences. For one thing, both of Billy Lee's knees went out, and so he retired, if you will, before George became president to be a cobbler at Mount Vernon. What happened to Richard is that he was put in charge of some operation a different operation at the plantation. Similar but not equal. So I think we've got two different stories going here. Were there undocumented servants? I think there are. I have read George Washington's will. I have read his slave accounts. I have also seen the archaeology evidence that there's a village attached to the Mount Vernon. And this was a black village that George encouraged them to build this black village, do business, do whatever a normal village would do. They were running businesses. Some of them were working the plantation. Some of them were working other trades. They were doing business with other places, other towns, other plantations, other people groups. The records that the archaeologists are digging up at Mount Vernon, there are more slaves on Mount Vernon than are in George's list. Why? We know for a fact he did not have Martha's slaves on his list. There must be other people that are not on that list as well, because there are too many bodies for the list. Make sense? So there's got to be something going on that we don't understand yet. Were there two black men at the deathbed? We have stories that put Billy Lee at Washington's deathbed. I've also heard a story that puts Richard at the deathbed. Here's the thing. Billy Lee was crippled. I've been up those stairs. If Billy Lee was in that much pain and his knees were not working, he would have needed help getting up the stairs and into Washington's bedroom. Well, Richard would have been, even if he had a limp, he would have been big enough to help Billy Lee up the stairs and into the room. The picture that we have from the deathbed does not tell us exactly who was in the room. So we don't know exactly who was there. We know Martha was there. We know a doctor was there. We know Billy Lee was there. But there had to have been other people in and out of that room during that time. Okay, here we go. So there was, hold on. Press while Richard was living. I found this. This is from the March 23rd Urbana Free Press in 1859 that talks about Richard. So he's getting his story is being heard and being passed around. And remember, he didn't die for 2 more years. So this was published while he was alive. I believe the original story was in Cincinnati. I'm still looking for that, but this is pretty cool information. Richard had warrants. This is really important. If you look here, I've got a pointer here. Here's the year, 1829. Stand up, Richard. Look here, warranty. And he got that land from David Chapman, who was the surveyor, not the owner, the surveyor, and he got 140 acres. That jives with every other story I've seen about warrants. The warrants were issued for 140 acres each. What happened to that land? That land was eventually sold. And, wait a minute, I've got a sales record here, which is really cool. This is a copy of the sales record. And here is, it was purchased with a warranty. There's the date, there's Richard Stanhope, and it went to Cyrus Taylor.
Is that in Champaign County or is it somewhere else? Just here.
There were two pieces of land. One is in Concord, and one is in Madison County. So the sales warrants for Champaign County are also showing the same thing. Purchased with a warrant, owned by Richard Stanhope, sold to somebody else for cash. Yeah. So we've got those. And there is a document that is on file with the Champaign County Recorder's Office, two of them, that show Richard bought land with a warrant and sold it for cash. Okay, that's very important. The other thing is he had money, because David Chapman, the conversion amount on that money that he paid David Chapman was about $4,000. Okay, how many of you have $4,000 sitting in your pocket? How many of us would have been able to do that without a bank? Richard had some significant money in his pocket, and that's a lot of money to have at that time period. So, if he got his warrants from Washington, and he had allowance or provision from Washington, that would explain why he had enough money to buy 140 acres. And he's not actually buying the land, he's just paying the surveyor.
Was this part of the Virginia military survey?
Yes, yes. Now, that's an important point. When George Washington went out to do his survey work, he was one of 4 or 5 teams. They came through Ohio. And we have George's path documented through. We've got 3 or 4 other paths that are documented through. So they went from what was known Pennsylvania and known Virginia all the way across. Some of them made it to the Mississippi River, and some of them didn't get that far. So George knew an awful lot about Ohio, because this was part, if you take those old colony maps, Virginia starts over here, and then it goes way over. And it went as far as they knew. Well, as far as anybody knew was the Mississippi River, because nobody had been any farther than that. Yeah, so it's a significant strip. There's a lot of land between here and Virginia. And West Virginia had not been split off yet, so they came through West Virginia and across. So Washington had been here on his surveys, so Washington knew what land was here. And that's another good question. How did Richard know that there was land here? Well, if he was in Washington's circle, he knew exactly where to come.
But the Virginia military survey was given to the veterans,
Yes,
the land.
yes.
So
And
would
they
that
had-
not be proved?
And they had a warranty. And I cannot find evidence of warranties being faked or defrauded. So he's got a warranty, so he must have done something to earn that warranty. But I don't have any evidence of the warranty still existing. We've got a few warranties that are still in existence here in the county. Most of them have John Adams' signature. I've seen a few with Jefferson's signature. Washington issued a very small number. So, did he have his warrant from Washington, or did he have a warrant from John Adams? I don't know, but we don't have a copy of that warranty in existence.
Where do you go to find those warrants? Like, where do they get archived?
That is something that would have ended up in a box, in his house, and it may have burned. Unless it was entrusted to a relative in a different area. These things show up in attics, in books, in shoeboxes. So we are always looking for some of these old documents. So if you find an old document and you think it's old and trash, don't throw it away. Bring it in, we'll take a photo of it, because if the ink is faded, we can pull up some of that faded ink and look at it.
How do they procure the warrants?
If you served as in the American Revolution, you were entitled to apply for a warrant, and you would go to your commander and get that warrant. And those warrants were signed by whoever was president at the time. So this deed piece is from London, and so this is the Madison County land. And that's the first piece that he bought. The second pieces that he bought were in Concord. Okay. Okay. I want to know who's in this painting. Do you see this black gentleman behind him? Looks like it could be just a random black gentleman that they put in the picture. But we've got a number of images where there's a black man attending George or attending his horses. Now we know that Richard knew an awful lot about horses. Is it possible that Richard's job as his body man, and that's the words that Richard used, body man, is it possible that as his body man, he was attending George's horses? It's possible. This is only one of about 6 or 7 good paintings that have a black man in them. There's another one where George is, he's off his horse, he's addressing what appears to be a group of soldiers, and there's a black man attending his horse as well. So we see this kind of image multiple times. So the question is, who's that supposed to represent? And I just don't know. So we have a few problems when we're doing research. If you've tried to do any research, you know this, you go back far enough and you've got some issues. First of all is language. When we're looking at, say, surveys, particularly like before 1850, it is really hard because they will have the man's name and they will have some other notations and 6 people in the house. That's it. That's not helpful. From a genealogy point of view, that is just useless information. But when we're looking at when they're recording the black people and the Native American people and other groups, there's some words and coding that we have forgotten how to read. So we're working on that. I've got friends that are doing a underrepresented patriots specialty group, and they're working on learning how to relearn how to read some of that language. So we have some language issues when we're doing that. The slave registries are not complete. We know this looking at George's list. His slaves are listed, but his not slaves are not. So that includes Martha's slaves. And there's a story that if Richard was presented to George when Richard was 4. Okay, there's a story. Richard is presented to George when Richard is 4. Well, is that George's slave or is that Mary Ball's slave? So he may not be on George's list because George didn't consider him to be my slave. So this is another issue where we've got to go back and see if we can find any of Mary Ball's paperwork to see if we can find Richard on those registries. Access to Washington documents has been a bit of a challenge. Anybody that's done any research trying to find things at Mount Vernon knows this. And I'm going to tell you, Janet got into a snit with somebody in the ladies of Mount Vernon. And I don't know who started it, but I know exactly how it ended. Janet was not happy with Mount Vernon, and Mount Vernon was not happy with Janet. Well, the Mount Vernon ladies actually published a slanderous report in somebody else's history book condemning not only Janet, but the Urbana chapter DAR. And they're not really excited about anybody in DAR from Ohio, those Ohio women. Janet was asking to see George's papers on the slaves. Can I see them? Well, Richard isn't there. Okay, but can I look at the paperwork? Seems like a reasonable research request, right? And I don't know who got off on which bad foot first, but neither one of them liked each other. So that's one of the challenges that we have, is overcoming some of those animated discussions that other people have had. I'm hoping that with the establishment of the Washington Library, that will be a little bit better to do. There's also a contention that Richard was illiterate. Okay, I'm not sure I buy this. My father is functionally illiterate. Okay, you guys have seen this, the Urbana newspaper. It's not big, it's not complicated, it's not hard to read, right? It would take my dad all day long to read that newspaper. Now, my dad he served as a CB in the Navies. He served as a police officer. He served as an electrical operator. He's not stupid, but his reading skills and his writing skills are not even third grade level, okay? Washington wanted all of the people in his purview to be able to read and write and have a skill. I don't believe that Richard was illiterate, completely illiterate. Now, there are places where you see he's made an X for his name. Here's my question. Did he make an X for his name because he didn't have a signature? Or did he make an X for his name because he was trying to be low-key? There was already this story going along in the black communities to be low-key. So making an X may have just been his way of being low-key. You also see white men doing the same thing because they don't have a signature or they can't read and write. So that's the ladies of Mount Vernon went over that. And then we have the missing documentation. The manumission document would be a very important piece to have. Have no idea where the warranty actually is, but we've got testimony in documents about the warranty. And we do have him on census reports.
And him filing to receive benefits, is there a signature, proof of a signature on there?
It's an X. He made an X. So we've got some problems, so I'm going to propose some solutions, and then I'm going to show you some artifacts. One of the ways to fix this would be for a descendant to apply for DAR. Now, I have Ann on my phone list, and I haven't called Ann, and the problem is I have a little bit of social anxiety. Some of my DAR friends are going to think this is funny. Making a phone call is very, very hard because I never know what's going to happen on the other end, and I haven't called her. And Connie, you need to get on me about calling her. Okay? So we just need at least one person to file that paperwork. I know the evidence is there. I know we need to prove it, but that's one of the ways we're going to prove his patriot level. Here's another one. We need to obtain the image of that freedom document, and then I need to find out if any other family members might have other documents. I read that there is a Bible somewhere that has some notes on Richard Stanhope, but there was also a notation in this document that said the page was barely readable. If you guys, any of your other cousins, have a Bible that's connected with the family, let's get a hold of that. I've got a camera up there that can read that and pull that ink up and we can read it. Okay, do you have a question?
I didn't have a question. I have a tried attempt, but they refused because they said they couldn't prove anything.
Let's work on it, because I have a whole team that is working on getting this. And we've got the proof. I just need to get that piece of paper back in my hand. DNA is a possibility. There's that possibility, that random possibility that Richard is a Washington. The only way we're going to be able to prove that is with DNA. And it's not one person taking the DNA. It would have to be several of you taking the DNA. Now, why do I think the DNA is positive with this? You remember the Jefferson descendants that are from Sally Hemings? How did they prove that? DNA. DNA, because Jefferson had other descendants with his wife and then with Sally. So DNA is a powerful tool, and we can use that. And this is that thing. I have the proof. I've seen it. We just need to find that list of injured soldiers. Okay. So I'm going to leave that there for a minute. We have a couple of things, and I want you to look at these items today. One of the things that we have here in the museum, and this is a horrible binder. We're going to have to fix that. This is a brief compilation of Janet Ebert's research. So it's here in the museum. I have 5 copies of that at home. One of the coolest things I found was this is a calendar, and Richard is in here. Let's see if I can pull him back up again. I think it was August. No, that's Fanny. He's in here, and it was really cool. But it's got a little bit of his story in here. So this is one of the calendars. We'll find it again. He's in the calendar. This is one of our DAR standard books for unfiltered patriots, unrecognized patriots. We're working very hard to fix that. Stanhope's name is in here, but there's a note that says we need additional information. But I think I found it. I have found a copy of his will. One of the really cool things, and just to let you know that this issue continues to rise up, this is a copy of the congressional report from 1976. Bud Brown, everybody know who Bud Brown was? Clarence Brown? He read into the congressional record Richard Stanhope's story, and there was a letter that was sent to the president at the time, 1976. We have that record here as well. So that's cool. So the stories keep circulating. But these are the really cool things. This hat is an amazing artifact. This is Richard's top hat. If you look on the brim, you can see the finger points, because he was known to constantly be tipping his hat to everyone he met, particularly the ladies. He's always tipping his hat. This is a French hat, and it still has the label in it, which is phenomenal.
How old do you think that hat is?
I think this one's pretty old. I haven't been able to do dating on it. Yeah, mine are real clean, I promise.
Well, is this supposed to sweat from your skin?
I'm trying to, it doesn't have a date on it, but the maker's mark is here, and I can chase this. So it was made in Paris, and there's a possibility that, I've heard a rumor that there's a possibility that this could have been presented as a gift from Lafayette. So,
I've heard that too.
yes, so I can by getting the information on the tag, I can run some information and I can get a good estimation on that. We know that Lafayette did his farewell tour and came through Ohio, and it is entirely possible that Richard Stanhope went to one or more of those celebrations. So, and is it likely that he knew that Richard knew Lafayette? It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible, particularly if he was working with George Washington at any number of his places. The other thing that is really cool is this is awesome. This is Richard's carpet bag. Look at that, people. It is beautiful. And if you look inside, the fabric on the inside is still intact. Yes. But it doesn't it looks like he could come right back and use it today. And those are phenomenal treasures. Now, let me tell you why these treasures are kept and where they are kept. These two items currently reside at the Laganda House, with Laganda chapter at the Pennsylvania House. Several years ago, I don't know how long ago it was, 20 years, 30 years? What do you think, Cheryl? Ages ago. Family members came through, they were cleaning out an attic, they had some artifacts, they brought them here to the museum, and some of them were kept here, and then the guy that was in charge says, oh, we don't need that. So the family took them from here to the Pennsylvania House, and thank God the Pennsylvania House captured those, and so we have them here for you to see today. So the Urbana chapter is very glad to work with the Laganda chapter, and we so appreciate the fact that they brought them here so that you can see them today. Okay, any questions? Yes.
Where is the cemetery in Conroe Township that this street is? What was the name of the cemetery?
Well, Johnson Cemetery, and it's behind a little church in the middle of the field. It's hard to get to. So, 29 and 560, corner 29 and 560. It is, I've been out there once. It's a challenge. I believe when the DAR did the second laying, there was a place to park, and you got on the bus, and then they took you from the bus, on the bus to the cemetery, and trips through the park and that kind of thing to get to the grave. Is that right? Do you remember that? Yeah.
We've been Concord School. But it's not hard to get to.
Okay.
It's a part of 29 by 60 is a parking place there.
Okay.
That's the thing there that might come out.
29 and 560. I do know that the Ohio State DAR Executive Board was out there last year. So, any other questions? Okay, Stanhope descendants, if you will stay with us for just a minute, we want to get a picture of you guys. Wouldn't it be awesome? I think you should get a picture with the hat and yeah. Yes, absolutely. Oh, yes, and we have Richard in there too. So, I am so glad that you were here today. I'm really, really, really excited that there was a mixed group. I see older people, I see a few younger people, I see both black and white, and that is so exciting because Janet's whole thing was, I've got this really cool presentation, but I'm not getting it to the right people. And so so those of you who are from the Stanhope family, I so appreciate you coming. And please, have conversations with me because I want to help find the rest of the story. You and I need to talk because we need to file again. And because if we find this one piece of paper, it's done.
And they already told them that basically it was going to be denied, so I didn't even pay to
Yeah.
follow through because what's the point? They were going to try to have me enlist underneath another one of my ancestors from a different side of the family, and I was like, that's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
This woman, I
Let's-
can do mine.
Let's come back and talk about Richard. So make an appointment with me before we leave today because, phone calls are hard.
Yes, ma'am.
Connie's glaring at me. Connie's glaring at me. I'm going to call him, but, yeah. Oh, yes, I like email. Okay.
I don't.
Oh, okay. Do we text? Okay, we can text. Okay, that's good. I can do that.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. We appreciate